I don't know why we can't get rid of Stephanie White. It's almost like Caitlin Clark can't shake this lady. The girl goes to the Olympics to train. Voila! Stephanie White appears. I'm telling you right now, when this CBA deal get done, if Stephanie White does not get the hell out of Caitlin Clark's way, I am going to lose.
Look at this fan right here. This person just reached their absolute limit. You can hear it in their voice. Months of watching the same thing unfold, and they've had enough. Why can't we just move on from Stephanie White? That's not some casual complaint you hear after a bad game. That's someone who's been building up frustration for a long time. And when Fever fans start talking like this, you know there's real tension brewing in Indiana. Most people miss the bigger picture here. White isn't just coaching Caitlin Clark during games. She's involved in everything Clark does. Training camps, off-season work, special events. White keeps showing up. Some fans are starting to wonder if all this involvement is actually holding back the league's brightest star. And the timing couldn't be worse with contract negotiations heating up across the league.
Here it says, Fever shares Stephanie White's move amid WNBA offseason. Stephanie White completed her first season with the Indiana Fever. We wish it was her last season. Just saying. Just saying. Here it says, let me get this out of here for y'all, man. There's too much going on. All right. Maybe they don't want me to get rid of that. Whatever. Here it says, Stephanie White had a memorable first season with the Indiana Fever.
Now, let's establish the facts. So Stephanie White just wrapped up year one as the Fever's head coach after 2 seasons in Connecticut. Her resume speaks for itself. Former coach of the year, legitimate credentials. The Fever specifically wanted her because of those Indiana roots. She played at Purdue, grew up understanding basketball culture in that state. Everything looked perfect on paper. Local coach paired with a local superstar sensation. But then reality hit during that first season, and cracks started showing that nobody saw coming. Injuries absolutely destroyed their roster. Clark went down with a season-ending injury. Cunningham got hurt. 3 other key players were done before playoffs even began. White somehow guided this depleted team to the semifinals and nearly upset Vegas, the eventual champions, pushing them to 5 games. Any other coach would get praised for that kind of performance with half their roster missing. So why are fans already calling for her job before she's even had a complete, healthy season to work with?
White made a public appearance on Wednesday night. The Fever took to social media to share the coach's off-season move. White was at Gainbridge Fieldhouse on Wednesday. The 48-year-old returned to the Fever's home arena, but it was not for the usual reason. This time around, White came as a fan supporting the Indiana Pacers. The Fever and the Pacers share the same arena. On Wednesday, the Pacers hosted the Toronto Raptors. White sat courtside to show her support. The Fever took social media to announce White's attendance. All right, so here you see Coach Stephanie White.
Here's what makes this situation fascinating. Fans aren't questioning White's competence as a basketball coach. They're not saying she doesn't know X's and O's. The complaint runs much deeper than that. They're arguing that White is somehow blocking Clark's path to greatness. That's a completely different accusation. It suggests the issue isn't about wins and losses or tactical decisions. It's about positioning and opportunity. When you frame it that way, you start to understand why this narrative caught fire among the fan base. They're not saying White can't coach basketball. They're saying her approach might be limiting what Clark can accomplish. During the 2025 season, even when Clark was healthy, questions emerged about minute management, offensive schemes that didn't showcase Clark's playmaking genius, media sessions that felt overly controlled and scripted. Individually, these seem like small issues, but together they create a pattern that makes fans nervous about wasted potential.
NBA, CBA foolishness, this clown show circus play out right before our eyes. And there was so many, like the WNBA and the WNBPA have messed this thing up at every single turn. There's been so many mistakes with this Caitlin Clark thing. They have literally like ruined it. Like they literally blew the opportunity for this thing to be bigger than ever. And it's just so disheartening and sad.
Here's where everything gets really messy. The collective bargaining talks. This whole situation is turning into a complete disaster for the league. Players want massive pay increases, while the WNBA struggles to prove it can generate sustainable revenue without torrent subsidies. Remember that All-Star game in Indianapolis, Clark's home market? Players wore those pay us what we're worth shirts and then delivered one of the most boring exhibitions anyone's ever witnessed. Fans were heading for the exits at halftime. The numbers don't lie about what happened when Clark entered the league. Her games averaged 3.2 million viewers when she played. Without her on the court, those numbers dropped by 70%. The Fever sold out every single home game at their arena, and it wasn't because of coaching schemes or team chemistry. People bought tickets to watch Caitlin Clark play basketball. So when the Players Association demands bigger paychecks based on increased revenue, they're essentially asking to get paid for what Clark's star power generated. And when White gets positioned as the architect of Indiana's success, fans see right through that narrative even if the league wants to ignore the obvious reality.
Now, we got to revisit some things. Doug Gottlieb was talking about, the WNBPA seems very entitled. I know you saw their response, the letter they wrote. They put the rat in front of the New York City NBA office and all of this stuff. And I think they forget that, Caitlin Clark is really the reason for all this. And a lot of people don't owe y'all stuff, man. The WNBA owners have been taking L's year after year after year. And y'all have been getting whatever y'all been getting. But it just kind of seems like a lot of entitlement, man. Let's give a listen to this.
So let me get this straight, okay? The WNBA has this new superstar, okay? This new superstar. And they have a chance with all of the dysfunctions in other sports to capitalize on the momentum of the sport. And over the weekend in Indianapolis, where one, Caitlin Clark owns that town, two,
Doug Gottlieb absolutely nailed this whole situation. The WNBA had lightning in a bottle, a genuine superstar capable of carrying the entire league to new levels during a time when other sports were dealing with major problems. And they botched it at every single turn. The league allowed veteran players to target Clark physically without meaningful consequences. Media personalities pushed narratives downplaying Clark's impact, even as television ratings proved otherwise. That all-star game showed exactly what happens when Clark isn't involved. Nobody cares. Throughout all of this, White has been right there managing the narrative around Indiana, controlling Clark's media access, making decisions that prioritize traditional team structure over maximizing their franchise players' unique impact. That's exactly what fans mean when they say White needs to step aside. Look at how the NBA handles generational talents. When LeBron joined Cleveland, they didn't hire someone who wanted to mold him into an existing system. They built everything around his ability. When Dallas got Luka, they handed him complete control and said, make it work. That's how you handle once-in-a-generation players. You eliminate barriers, create space, maximize their distinctive skill. White appears to be coaching Clark like she's just another all-star structured approach. Defined roles, team-first philosophy. That sounds reasonable in theory. But when you have someone capable of transforming your franchise's entire financial future, traditional methods might not apply.
Caitlin Clark, but the rest of the league is going to run into hey, we're back in that same predicament of not only people not caring, but people actually pushing it away. And it's going to be blamed. It will, without any question, say, hey, America is male, chauvinistic, whatever, alternative lifestyle, whatever, when that's not what it is. Is there some of that? Yeah, there's always going to be something. There's also reality to it, right? Women are less athletic than men. It is not the jaw-dropping athleticism that we're used to seeing in professional basketball. It's just not. Their skill level, though better than it's ever been, is not nor will ever be at the level of men. Right? And yet they want to compare themselves in salary to it. So there's part of that, there's a reality to it, a harsh reality to it.
Let's address the entitlement problem, because the contract negotiations expose some uncomfortable truths about league culture. The WNBA has lost money throughout most of its existence. NBA ownership has basically subsidized operations for years, treating women's basketball like an expensive charity project that promotes the sport. That model isn't sustainable long-term, but it's been the reality. Then Clark arrives, and suddenly Indiana turns profitable. Suddenly, games draw real television audiences. Suddenly, merchandise actually sells. The league's response is demanding 30% revenue sharing and massive across-the-board salary increases. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Most players aren't generating the revenue they're demanding to be paid from. It's not about gender bias to acknowledge that women's basketball operates at a different athletic level than men's basketball. That's just biological reality. The skill level has improved tremendously, but it still doesn't command premium television contracts on pure merit alone. Clark changed that equation specifically. Her college career at Iowa drew audiences rivaling men's tournament games. Her rookie season created momentum that lifted the entire league. But instead of recognizing that and building a sustainable model around it, the WNBA decided to make demands as if every player contributed equally to that success. White, as coach of the team that benefited most from Clark's presence, has stayed remarkably quiet about this dynamic. She hasn't challenged the narrative that minimizes Clark's individual impact. She hasn't advocated for building Indiana's entire system around maximizing Clark's abilities. Instead, she's coached like it's any other season with any other star player, and that's driving fans crazy.
Hey, that's what it is. Take it or leave it. And this is why the WNBA is now ignoring the WNBPA still. They're not even entertaining more offers from them. They like, look, y'all know the offer we sent y'all. We sent y'all 3 comprehensive offers. You can either get one of them or it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Get down in the comments and let me know what you think.
Adam Silver's response tells you everything about how NBA leadership views these negotiations. They're doing what they can to increase salaries. Notice he didn't promise 30% revenue sharing. He didn't commit to NBA-level pay scales. He said the league would offer more money, and that's the proposal on the table. Take it or leave it, the WNBA responded by basically ignoring the Players Association's latest demands. They presented 3 comprehensive offers and essentially said, choose one of these or we're finished negotiating. That's not how desperate organizations behave when they feel like they need to appease their workforce. That's how organizations act when they know they hold the leverage. This matters for White and Clark because if these contract talks go sideways, if there's a work stoppage or extended dispute, Indiana's momentum dies completely. Clark's prime years get wasted. The window that opened in 2024 slams shut because the league couldn't get out of its own way. Fans see White as part of this problem. Not because she lacks coaching ability, she's clearly competent, but because she represents old-school WNBA thinking. The everyone's equal mentality that doesn't account for the reality that some players are exponentially more valuable than others. When you're coaching the most valuable player in league history, that approach breaks down completely. So, here's the question that will define Indiana's immediate future. Can White evolve? Can she transform from being a traditional team-first coach into someone who understands that Clark isn't just another star player? She's a once-in-a-generation talent requiring a completely different approach. If White can't make that adjustment, fans have legitimate reasons for concern. Not because she's incompetent, but because the opportunity cost of having the wrong coach for Clark is staggering. We're talking about potentially wasting the prime years of someone who could legitimately transform women's basketball into a major commercial sport. The injuries in 2025 gave White some breathing room. You can't fairly judge any coach when half the roster is unavailable by playoff time, but that grace period is over. The 2026 season will reveal whether White can truly maximize what she has in Clark, or whether she'll keep trying to fit generational talent into conventional systems. If it's the latter, if we see another season of Clark being managed rather than unleashed, those calls for White's removal will get much louder. Fever fans have witnessed what's possible when Clark gets freedom. They've watched her take over games, carry entire franchises, create opportunities that don't exist for anyone else. They don't want a coach who limits that. They don't want structure and discipline and team concepts if those things restrict what Clark can accomplish. They want someone who understands that you don't coach Caitlin Clark. You enable her, support her, build everything around maximizing her extraordinary abilities. That's the standard White faces. Based on year 1, it's reasonable to question whether she's the right fit for that role. The semifinal run looks impressive on paper, but remove the injury excuses and ask yourself, did we see the best possible version of Clark under White's system? Most honest observers would say absolutely not. That's why fans are frustrated. That's why you hear calls for change before White has completed a full healthy season. In sports, windows close rapidly. Generational talents don't maintain their prime forever. If Indiana wastes these years because they have a coach more focused on control than unleashing greatness, that becomes a tragedy extending beyond wins and losses. The contract negotiations will resolve somehow. Revenue sharing will get figured out. Salaries will increase to some degree. But whether White is the right coach for Clark, that gets answered on the court in 20. If the answer is no, Indiana needs to be prepared to make changes before it's too late. Here's the reality nobody wants to acknowledge. Clark doesn't need the WNBA as much as the WNBA needs her. She could play internationally for more money. She could retire and move into broadcasting. She could start her own league if she chose to. The leverage doesn't belong to the WNBA or Indiana. It belongs to Clark herself. If White can't figure out how to coach that reality, how to embrace being the supporting character in someone else's story, then she becomes the obstacle fans already believe she represents. Not intentionally, but because the job demands something she might not be capable of providing. That's the uncomfortable truth driving this entire controversy. It's why you'll keep hearing about White and Clark for the foreseeable future. This isn't just about basketball. It's about whether the WNBA can adapt to having a true superstar, or whether league culture and coaching philosophies will waste the biggest opportunity women's basketball has ever received. The answer comes next season, one way or another.